They found Earth by accident. The Galactic Empire's scout vessel, Imperatrix Valor, skimmed the outer edges of a spiral arm when it detected an anomaly, a faint web of radio emissions encasing a pale blue planet. At first, it was dismissed as background noise from a pre-FTL civilization, too insignificant to warrant mention. But protocol demanded cataloging. That was the beginning. High Admiral Sorov of the Dominion Armada stared at the rotating holograph of Earth with mild disdain. Primitive, he muttered. Fragmented political states, conflicting belief systems, ecological decay. And yet they've split the atom. The Empress's eyes, cold, unblinking, veiled in centuries of calculation, remained fixed on the data streaming past. A volatile species, she said softly. Unpredictable. Dangerous in their chaos. Sorov's voice sharpened. We've conquered more advanced civilizations. These humans lack cohesion. Their strength is erratic. They would burn themselves down without our intervention. And yet they haven't, said Scholar Prime Velar, one of the rare non-military voices permitted within the Empire's ruling chamber. Despite wars, disasters, and internal strife, they persist. They adapt, and in doing so, they've reached the threshold of stars. The Empress turned from the projection. You believe they should be preserved? I believe they should be studied, Velar answered carefully. Their cultural data is immense. Violent, yes, but complex. Their myths are soaked in blood, but so are their triumphs. The room simmered with tension. The Empire prided itself on overwhelming superiority. Social, technological, moral. The suggestion that humans deserved more than conquest bordered on heresy. Sorov sneered. We are not anthropologists. We are Empire. We do not ask, we take. Subjugate them before they poison others with their disorder. The Empress raised a hand, silencing both. Begin preparations. I want Earth's defenses neutralized within a cycle. No orbital bombardment. Minimal planetary damage. We will make them kneel, not extinguish them. The order rippled across fleets and colonies. War machines stirred, and command relays buzzed with deployment code. The Empire was not accustomed to resistance. Civilizations fell like dominoes when the banners of dominion filled their skies. Except Earth did not fall. The first wave of incursion came under the guise of sterilization. Orbital platforms silenced, major communications satellites fried, power grids disrupted. Within hours, a third of Earth went dark. But darkness did not bring surrender. In Sao Paulo, power returned in less than a day through decentralized solar network. In Kiev, a militia sabotaged an Imperial scouting ship with modified mining drones. In Tokyo, a hacked frequency played continuous footage of World War II firebombings, overlaid with the message, "We have known war. Show us yours." Sorov's patience cracked. What nonsense is this? They transmit old battles as if it's meant to frighten us. Velar looked pale. They're not trying to frighten us. They're reminding themselves. Aboard the Imperatrix Valor, Commander Threx reported to his superiors with what should have been pride. A terrestrial resistance cell in northern Africa had been destroyed, ruthlessly and efficiently. Yet something in his report caused unease in the war room. They fought to the last, Threx said. Even when outnumbered, outgunned, and hopeless, they refused to retreat. One detonated an explosive vest with a smile. They are not the first species to resist, Sorov snapped. No, Threx admitted. But they are the first to enjoy it. The resistance began evolving faster than the Empire could model. Humans captured fragments of fallen ships and began reconfiguring them using their crude yet ingenious tools. Empire encryption was cracked within weeks. Underground cities rose from abandoned mines. No empire had ever seen a species so fast to mimic, so willing to lose lives for ground inches. And then came the broadcast. It began as a low-band signal, hijacked from a deep space relay. Empire translators struggled briefly with the language, a hard, blunt tongue bristling with consonants. Then the image came into focus. An aging human in a military uniform, eyes tired but burning with something older than rage. My name is General Alina Cordis, Supreme Commander of the Terran Unified Resistance. You came here expecting fear. You found memory instead. Ours is not a peaceful history, but it is a proud one. You call us chaotic, primitive, fragmented. And you're right. But we are also survivors. She paused, leaning toward the camera. You think we fear war? We are war. Our species was forged in it. From spears to tanks to atom bombs, we've bathed in blood, ours and others. You think your fleets will frighten us? We've annihilated cities before, our own. We know what it costs. The signal crackled, but held. So come. Land your ships. March your legions. Try to teach us obedience. But understand this. You are not the first empire we've seen. And if history tells us anything, you will not be the last we bury. The feed cut to silence. For a moment, across the cold vacuum between ships and stars, the Empire held its breath. In the great command hall, the Empress stood, gaze turned inward. They speak of memory as weapon, she murmured. Wheeler, watching the room for reactions, nodded once. They are not trying to win, Your Grace. They are trying to remind us what happens to those who think them weak. The Empress didn't reply. She simply walked to the viewport and stared at the pale blue planet suspended in the void, bruised, flickering, but unbowed. Below, humanity prepared for the next strike. Above, the Empire hesitated for the first time. They called the summit in an abandoned bunker beneath Geneva. Concrete walls from a forgotten century now echoed with the voices of the world's last hope. Generals, scientists, diplomats, figures once separated by politics and oceans, stood shoulder to shoulder, the weight of extinction burning behind their eyes. General Alina Cordis leaned over the table, her face drawn tight with fatigue and fury. The viral broadcast had ignited something unexpected. Not fear. Resolve. Her words had spread through civilian networks and dark military channels alike, sparking uprisings and cooperation in equal measure. For the first time in human history, the divisions that defined them, nation, creed, skin, class, began to dissolve. We do not match them in firepower, she said, voice low and steady. But we don't need to. We just need to be more human than they can understand. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Around her, people nodded. Meera Chaudhary, a quantum engineer from Mumbai, had already begun disassembling wreckage from a downed Imperial probe. What she found terrified her, not because it was beyond her comprehension, but because it wasn't. Their technology wasn't mystical. It was layered, advanced, yes, but no more impossible than the leap from bronze to steel. They built an empire on optimization, she told the room. Efficiency. Standardization. Predictability. Cordis tilted her head. So we break the pattern, Meera said. We turn chaos into doctrine. We weaponize unpredictability. In the shadows of Tokyo's neon ruins, resistance fighters were using repurposed subway tunnels to stage ambushes. A squad of former gamers, kids barely out of adolescence, had hacked into an Empire drone swarm, crashing them into one another mid-flight with suicidal precision. In Lagos, a rogue AI developed for marketing algorithms had been retooled to flood Empire communications with synthetic human history, projecting fictional uprisings, false victories, and fake cities. Confusion rippled through the Empire's command structure. They had expected a single united force to crush. Instead, they faced a billion minds with a billion ideas, each more audacious than the last. They think our disorder is weakness, Cordis told her team. But it's evolution. Chaos is the crucible we were born in. The first victory came in orbit. It wasn't grand. A single Empire cruiser, Vorax Mercy, was lured into Earth's shadow by a coordinated global power grid fluctuation, its sensors blinded momentarily. Waiting above the dark side of the moon, a human-piloted shuttle, barely spaceworthy, patched together from an old ISS module and stolen Empire propulsion tech, slammed into the ship's underside with a payload of repurposed mining explosives. The explosion fractured the hull and exposed a breach in the fuel matrix. The cruiser detonated in silence, a ripple of white fire reflecting across Earth's atmosphere. The world celebrated not with parades, but with silence. Mourning the dead. Honoring the impossible. Understanding the war had only just begun. Back in orbit, Commander Threx surveyed the aftermath from his ship's observation deck. A fragment of human wreckage floated by, trailing wires and scorched paint. Among the debris, a message had been etched in English and crude pictographs. "Still think we won't fight?" His mandibles clicked uneasily. They should have crumbled by now. Scholar Prime Veeler, who had requested access to human transmissions without censor, was quiet for a long moment. He had spent days watching their films, their documentaries, their raw footage. He had seen the eyes of children in trenches, women holding rifles in ruined cities, bare hands digging through rubble to save strangers. "They're not trying to win like we do," he said. "They're trying not to lose what they've already earned." Threx glanced at him. "You mean their territory?" "No. Their right to exist." Down on Earth, Cordis paced through what used to be a university lecture hall, now transformed into a tactical war room. Maps stretched across the walls, augmented with satellite imagery, troop estimates, and speculative alien deployment zones. On one wall, someone had spray-painted in red, "History is a weapon." A child's voice echoed through the corridor behind her. A girl, no older than 10, reciting names of battles from a history book like they were prayers. Stalingrad. Dien Bien Phu. Fallujah. Sarajevo. Aleppo. Cordis turned, pausing at the doorway. "Who taught you those?" The girl looked up. "My father. He said their lessons." Cordis crouched, meeting the child's gaze. "Do you know what the lessons are?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. "Don't run. Remember." Outside, resistance networks across the globe shared strategies like viruses. Farmers in rural Nebraska shared drone jamming frequencies with hackers in Seoul. Russian cosmonauts in a forgotten orbiting lab redirected solar arrays to blind an imperial satellite. The Vatican issued a declaration of Earth First sanctity, converting centuries of doctrine into a spiritual call for unity. What emerged was not a singular army, but a storm. Fast, fluid, relentless. Humanity was not a sword. It was a wildfire. The Empress received the reports without a word. Fleet losses. Disrupted logistics. An increasing number of Imperial soldiers refusing to advance, unnerved by intercepted transmissions, tales of battles humans had fought against themselves. Her advisors begged for escalation. Orbital bombardments. Biological containment. But she held back. "They are not what we thought," she said at last. "They are not children. They are ancient, scarred. And they have taught themselves to grow from ash." One of her aides, a younger officer too inexperienced to know fear, scoffed. "They've killed a cruiser and staged a few disruptions. Their spirit is admirable. But they cannot win." "No," she agreed. "But they can make us question whether we should." She turned to the central display, a mosaic of intercepted human broadcasts, from homemade videos of resistance to flickers of ancient war documentaries. In one grainy clip, a black and white soldier looked into the camera, mud streaked across his face, and said, "You want peace, prepare for war." The Empress exhaled slowly. They prepared. And across Earth, in silence and grit, the war continued, unfolding not just on the battlefield, but in the minds of those who watched and wondered, what kind of species survives by remembering every scar? The Empire had come expecting conquest. Now it struggled to understand endurance. The first Imperial defector arrived in a stolen drop pod, burning a streak of fire across the skies of Patagonia before slamming into a frozen lake. Her name was Kael'tra Voss, once an elite linguistics strategist aboard the Crown of Obedience. By the time Earth forces found her, frost had already crystallized around her armor, but her voice, cracked, urgent, repeated a single phrase. they lied to us. General Cordis personally authorized her retrieval. Kael'Tra sat, shackled but unguarded, across from Cordis in a makeshift interrogation tent built from scavenged tarp and steel. Her eyes, the color of storm-lit glass, tracked every flicker of human movement outside the flap. Soldiers laughed. Children ran between supply crates. People were not huddling in fear. They were rebuilding. I was trained to decode threats, Kael'Tra said quietly. My purpose was to study patterns of resistance, languages of rebellion. But your species has no pattern. You defy every projection. I started to think, maybe the projections were wrong. Cordis didn't smile. She didn't blink. You didn't defect because of strategy. No, Kael'Tra admitted. I defected because I read your history. She slid a data slate across the table. On it were names. Millions, engraved from human wars, genocides, revolutions, civil uprisings. But beside each name were stories of defiance. Of people pulling strangers from rubble. Of soldiers refusing unjust orders. Of prisoners singing in darkness. You're violent, Kael'Tra said. But you're not evil. You remember too much to be. Cordis didn't respond. She turned her gaze to the sky. Imperial ships still glinted above like silent daggers in the sun. The war hadn't stopped, but it had shifted. More defectors followed. Not many, but enough to fracture the myth of imperial unity. Voss's recordings, testimonies of Earth's resilience, documentaries she had translated into Dominion tongue, circulated through encrypted channels within the Empire's fleet. Soldiers began questioning the narrative they'd been fed for generations. A captain aboard the Judgment Flame disobeyed bombardment orders over a civilian sector in Cairo. A logistics crew near Luna Base sabotaged their own fuel lines. Entire squads pretended to misfire during Earthside skirmishes, letting human defenders escape. It wasn't yet mutiny. But it was contagion. Threx, no longer stationed in orbit but sent planetside to assess ground contamination, stepped carefully through the ruins of Berlin. His once pristine uniform bore streaks of dirt and ash. He had seen things the simulations never prepared him for: wounded humans shielding enemies, medics tending to captured Empire troops without hate. He found himself in a museum, what remained of it, where cracked statues still stood in defiance of time. One sculpture depicted a soldier holding a child, cradling life despite destruction. The inscription beneath read, "Even in hell we build." Threx stared at it for a long time. Veeler, back aboard the Imperial flagship, worked tirelessly, analyzing the shift. He had stopped presenting reports to Sorov, who now only demanded silence and precision strikes. The Empress, however, had begun requesting stories. Not tactics, not targets, stories. "Tell me what they dream of," she asked him once. Veeler showed her an old human film. Black and white. A man standing before tanks, alone. Another of a woman leading a march with nothing but a sign. Yet another of a child pulling a friend from rubble after an airstrike. "They dream of meaning," he said. "Not order." The Empress no longer argued. She simply listened. On Earth, a new plan emerged, not from the High Command but from the people. A global signal was constructed from thousands of patched satellites and hijacked Imperial beacons. A single message, stitched from dozens of languages, was broadcast not just to the Empire, but to every world they had conquered. It was not a cry for help. It was a record. "We are the children of chaos," the voice declared. "We have burned, rebuilt, destroyed, and endured. If you kneel under the Dominion, know this: we do not seek your war. But if it must come, we will teach you what resistance truly means." The signal showed no weapons, no grand threats, just images, of humans mourning and celebrating, of rescuing their enemies, of rebuilding in ash. It ended with a simple line, scrawled in graffiti on a ruined wall. "History is not a chain. It's a fire." The message reached more than intended. Across distant colonies, cracks in the Empire's foundation began to show. whispers of defiance, secret murals painted on military walls, words in human tongues etched by alien hands: resist, remember, rise. The Empress convened her highest circle. Sorov stormed in, demanding an end to the hesitation. They must be crushed, he said. Their legacy erased. Wheeler shook his head. Their legacy is why they fight. They are a danger to the order of the galaxy. No, the Empress said quietly. They are the proof that the galaxy's order was flawed. She stood slowly, her voice now carrying finality. Call back the Armada. Silence. Even Sorov, thunderous and unrelenting, froze. They have won more than ground, she continued. They have won the right to be remembered. When the last of the Empire's ships withdrew, Earth did not cheer. Quartus watched them leave from a mountain ridge in the Rockies. Around her, engineers were already designing better satellites. Children studied language, not weapons. Fighters turned to builders. The war had ended not in a treaty, but in transformation. Kael'tra stood beside her, breathing in cold Earth air. You think they'll come back? She asked. Quartus answered without hesitation. Maybe. Maybe not. She glanced at the horizon, where the first of Earth's new ships were already rising. But if they do, they won't find the same humans. Kael'tra nodded, understanding. They would find a species that remembered, that adapted, that learned not just how to fight empires, but how to outlast them. The galaxy would remember, too. The stars had grown quieter in the years since the last Imperial ship vanished beyond Jupiter's reach. No beams lanced the sky. No orbital alarms rang. Earth had stopped bracing for annihilation and instead turned inward, to reflect, to rebuild, and to prepare. Not out of fear, but duty. They were no longer just survivors of a war, they were custodians of a warning. In a university rebuilt over the bones of the old MIT campus, Kael'tra Vos stood behind a podium before a packed lecture hall of humans and aliens alike. A broadcast drone hovered silently in the corner, recording. Her eyes flicked between species, former enemies, now students of the same uneasy truth. We once believed obedience was peace, she began. That order preserved life. That resistance was chaos. And then we came here. To you. And we saw what history looks like when no one forgets. Among the students sat Mira Chaudhuri, older now, her once youthful energy tempered by years of tireless work. She smiled faintly, remembering when she'd first helped Kael'tra decipher the deeper currents of human history. Not just the violence, but the meaning threaded between the scars. They had spent nights poring over war memoirs, victory speeches, letters from soldiers long gone. It wasn't the weapons that had impressed Kael'tra. It was the contradictions. You teach your children about your mistakes, Kael'tra continued. You let them see the horrors you survived. You don't erase the pain. You enshrine it. That was your weapon. Not your guns. Your memory. The lecture ended not with applause, but with silence. Reverence. Outside, the city hummed, not in war, but in anticipation. The Unity Assembly was scheduled to convene at sunrise, the first truly interstellar body composed of Earth and a growing number of ex-Imperial worlds. Some of them had fought against Earth. Others had never even known rebellion was possible until the human signal reached them. All of them remembered the same message. History is not a chain. It's a fire. General Alina Cortis had refused ceremonial titles after the war, though people still called her by rank. She preferred her role now, quiet, advisory, peripheral. But when the assembly asked her to speak at the convocation, she didn't decline. She stood that morning on the summit platform beneath a golden sky, flanked by leaders of once-conquered worlds, the air electric with expectation. I'm not here to give you peace, she said. Peace isn't something you're given. It's something you fight to keep every day. She gestured to the crowd, to the alien banners flying beside Earth's own. You're not here because you were liberated. You're here because you chose to be. We didn't win a war, we proved an idea. That no empire lasts when people remember who they are. Cameras captured every word, but Cordes wasn't speaking to history anymore. She was speaking to the future, because that, she'd learned, was the real battlefield. In orbit, the Endurance awaited its maiden voyage, a human-built starship formed from salvaged Imperial tech and stubborn Earth engineering. It wasn't a warship. It wasn't even fast by galactic standard. But it had one thing no other vessel in known space carried: an archive. Not of human conquest, of human survival. Stories, documentaries, artifacts, testimonials. A cultural time capsule. It would travel to newly freed worlds, not to enforce, but to offer perspective. Knowledge. A reminder. Commander Juno Lang, once a Resistance pilot, now captained the Endurance. She had fought in the Paris holdout, flown suicide runs through orbital defenses. She carried every loss like an extra rib. But today she smiled. Not because the war was over, but because something better had begun. "They'll test us again," she said to her crew as the countdown ticked. "Another empire, another ideology. The galaxy doesn't rest. But when they come, they won't find us unready." Her second-in-command, a scaled Kareth-born tactician named Solon, gave a dry laugh. "They'll find stories waiting." "Exactly," Juno said. "And if they listen, maybe they won't need a war to understand." The ship launched with no fanfare. Just purpose. Back on Earth, Kael'tra watched the liftoff from the hills beyond Geneva. She didn't wear a uniform. She wore a simple scarf gifted to her by a mother whose son she'd once fought against. It was hand-woven, imperfect, and therefore perfect. Beside her stood Velar, no longer Scholar Prime, just Velar, visitor, witness, perhaps something like a friend. He'd stayed after the Empire's collapse, not to advise, but to learn. He was writing his own book now. Empires fall, memory remains. "You think they'll believe the stories?" he asked. "Some will," Kael'tra said. "Some won't. That's not our concern." Velar turned to her. "Then what is?" "That we keep telling them," she answered. "Until remembering becomes stronger than forgetting." In a quiet home outside what used to be Damascus, a girl, now older, a teenager, sat beside her father. He was teaching her history again. But this time, not just about Earth's wars. About the choice humanity made when offered the chance for vengeance. About restraint, mercy, the real victories. She looked up at him. "Why didn't we destroy them when we had the chance?" He smiled sadly. "Because we knew how that story ends. And we were tired of repeating it." Far beyond the moon, the Endurance continued its silent arc toward the stars. And somewhere out there, another empire, one not yet known, listened to the ripple of history carried across space. Perhaps they'd hear the warning. Or perhaps, one day, they'd come. If they did, they would find a planet not armored in fear, but forged in remembrance. A world that had made history its shield.